Ketvav. Ketvav. If a cistern is between two courtyards, we may not draw water from it on Shabbos, unless they made a partition for 10 tefachim high, whether above or below, or within its walls. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamil says, Beis Shammai says below, but Beis Hillel says above. Rabbi Yehuda says a partition should not be more effective than the wall that is between them. If a canal passes through a courtyard, we may not draw water from it on Shabbos, unless they made a partition 10 tefachim high at the inlet and at the outlet. Rabbi Yehuda says the wall over it is considered a partition, and Rabbi Yehuda says it happened that there was a canal in Abel, from which they drew water on Shabbos upon the ruling of the sages. They answered him because it did not have the minimum dimensions. If a balcony is above the water, we may not draw water from it on Shabbos unless they made a partition 10 tefachim high for it, either from above or below. Similarly, two balconies, one above the other, if they made a partition for the upper one but did not make one for the lower one, both are prohibited unless they make an eruv. Okay.
Right. Chatzer shehi pechusa me'arba amos. Okay, so you've got this very small chatzer outside the house. Okay, and it's less than 4 by 4 amos. It's like it's not even a chatzer.
Right.
It's just a little patch of land, and it borders on the Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Ein shofchin besocha mayim b'Shabbos. Now, you want to throw out your wastewater on Shabbos. The natural thing to do is to throw it on a piece of ground that's outside your house. But because this piece of ground is so small, what's naturally going to happen is that the water is going to flow out into the Rosh Hashanah. Means you're basically throwing water into the Rosh Hashanah, which you're not allowed to do because it's hotzah. You take it's a certainty that the water is going to go out, and it's a psik reisha that you're going to throw the water onto the ground, and it's going to go into the Rosh Hashanah. Elim kein asula. And if, by the way, just what's implicit over here is that if you've got more than daled amos, even if the water might go out into the Rosh Hashanah, it's okay because the ground will typically absorb as much. You can count on the fact that the ground is going to absorb some of the water and possibly all of the water. So that's not any more psik reisha. It could be that the water will be absorbed into the ground before it goes to the Rosh Hashanah.
There's no consideration here that you might be watering the lawn, even though you're not having
We're
your
not talking about
intention.
grass. This is not talking about grass. This is talking
Okay.
about it's just a piece of hard ground or just earth. That's it.
Oh.
We're not going to muddy the waters. Excuse the
The river
excuse the
French.
expression. I did not intend that to be a pun, but it came out pretty well. So um okay, so what's the eight? So if you've got this small little patch of ground and you want to be able to pour water into it, Elim ken asula uka. You've got to make an uka, which is a little it's a little
Like a
pit.
pit.
It's a little pit. Okay. Machzekes sasayim min hanekev ulamata. So it's got to be able to hold a minimum of 2 se'ah of water. Okay, how much is a se'ah? That is there, sorry, did you do a calculation of how much that is? Um, yeah, about 26 liters. There we go. So it's going to be about 26 liters, which once you're digging a hole is actually not that big.
Right.
Okay, so you make yourself a pit of 26 liters. It's and that is measured from wherever it starts spilling over. That's the nekev is the spout, because it's obviously your thing is going to be designed so that the water is going to run out of your property, not back into it. Okay. Bein mi b'chutz, bein mi b'fnim. And you're also allowed to do it entirely inside your property or partially bordering on the Rosh Hashanah, because what you've got over here is basically a makom patur. It's either part of your Rosh Hashanah or it's makom patur. It's not big enough to be its own Rosh, and therefore it's sort of the halfway ground between the Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. So, and you're allowed to put things into the into the makom patur. But if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna do part of the pit going outside or under your fence, then you've got to make sure that it's covered on that side. You don't need to do that if it's entirely inside your property. Why does it need to be covered? Because you might because you might decide you might be getting into this whole thing of making the ditch, making the pit, and make it so big that it's actually Dalit al Dalit.
Ah,
You really got into your digging thing, and now suddenly it's a new rishus and it's outside of your rishus, so that's why you have to cover it. Um, okay. Mishnah Yud, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Biv. So Biv, that's a gutter pipe. Shehu Kamur Arba Amos B'Rishus Harabim. If your gutter pipe is covered for 4 amos inside the Rishus Harabim, of course, naturally, it's going to flow out after that. Shofchin Nesocha Mayim B'Shabbos. Then you have a full-on heter to pour water into the gutter pipe on Shabbos, even though it's going to end up in the Rosh Hashanah, because it's going through this part that's covered and it's not so obvious that it's well, more to the point, it's that he says that the ground underneath the gutter pipe, well, it's basically a ditch. It's not like, you don't think of a metal pipe. It's like a gutter ditch that's been dug into the Rosh Hashanah, but it's covered for 4 amos. So then you can say, okay, your water will probably be absorbed in the gutter before it reaches the Rosh Hashanah. And if it doesn't, that wasn't your intention. Chachamim omrim afilu gago chatzer mea ama. Even if you have a roof or a chatzer of huge proportions, and it's got a gutter pipe leading out into the Rosh Hashanah. Lo yishpoch al pi habiv. You may not pour into the opening of the gutter pipe, because this is a certainty it's going to go out into the Rosh Hashanah. You're basically pouring it straight into the Rosh Hashanah, and it's not. We don't accept that. Aval shofechu migag legag. But if you're standing on the roof, you can pour it onto the roof, even though you know it's going to flow down into the gutter pipe and into the Rosh Hashanah. The Maim Yordim Laviv. You just let the water do what it does, but you don't do it directly.
correctly, right. Okay.
Okay. Achatzer v'achsadra mitzdarfim arba amos. So if you've got a portico and then an uncovered part of the chatzer outside your house, you can count those together to the 4 amos that you can pour the water onto the portico and it flows onto the chatzer and it flows into the Rosh Hashanah, and that's considered okay.
Right.
Yud Aleph. V'chein shtei diyut ha'os zo keneged zo. Okay, so what you have in this setup, I don't know. This is complicated enough where I might imagine that ArtScroll's made a diagram. Have they?
No, they haven't.
They
I
haven't.
was looking to see that.
Hmm. Okay, so your situation is like this. You've got a chatzer with shared by a number of residents, and for the purposes of this Mishnah, they did not make an Erev Chatzeris. But what you've got is each resident has dug
They have a balcony.
a little
They
pit in
call it
their
a
own.
balcony.
Huh?
They call it a balcony.
Okay.
Similarly, two balconies that are opposite one another.
Okay. So fine. They're facing. It doesn't. They don't have to be facing each other. They're just adjoining onto the same courtyard, which doesn't have an Eruv. Okay. Um, and then it goes out into the Rosh Hashanah. But one of the guys put an ukkah inside his own property, which then would spill into the shared area. Okay, miktasan asu ukkah, miktasan lo asu ukkah. Some of them made the pit, and some of them didn't make the pit. Okay. So es she'asu uka mutarin ve'es she'lo asu uka asurin. So the people who were smart and made the pit ahead of time, they're allowed to pour their wastewater into the pit, and that water will spill into the chatzer and possibly into the Rosh Hashanah. But either way, that's just like the uka is matir from one person to go from his chatzer into the Rosh Hashanah. So too with a shared courtyard, if you've got the ones who've got the ukkah in their personal property, you are allowed to pour it into that to go into the chatzer.
Okay. All right. Vav vav. If five groups spent the shot, right?
Oh, sorry, I was in the wrong place.
Vav. If five groups spent the Shabbos in one mansion, Beit Shammai says an error for each group. Beit Hillel says one error for all of them, and they agree, however, that when some of them are quartered in rooms or upper stories, they need an error for each group. Brothers or partners who eat at their father's table but who sleep in their own homes need an error for each one. Therefore, if one of them forgot to contribute to the Erev, he must nullify his rights. When is this so? When they bring the Erev to another place. But if the Erev was brought to them and there are no other residents in the courtyard, they need not contribute to the Erev. Five courtyards which open one into the other and into an alley. If they made an Erev in the courtyards but did not make a shituf in the alley, they're permitted in the courtyards but prohibited in the alley. If they did make a shituf in the alley, they are permitted here and there. If they made an Erev for the courtyards and a shituf for the alley, but one of the residents of the courtyard forgot to contribute to the Erev, they are permitted here and there. If one of the residents of the alley did not participate in the shituf, they are permitted in the courtyards, but prohibited in the alley. For an alley is to the courtyards as a courtyard is to the houses.
Okay.
Okay. And the Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Yud Zayin base. A person may take a hammer with which to crack nuts, or a hatchet with which to cut a cake of pressed figs, a saw with which to slice cheese, a shovel with which to scoop up dried figs, a widowing shovel or a pitchfork on which to put something for a child, a spindle or a weaver's reed on which to spear fruit, a hand needle with which to take out a thorn, or a sapmaker's needle with which to open a door. A cane for olives, there is a knot at its end. It's susceptible to tumor contamination, and if not, it is not susceptible to tumor contamination. In either case, it may be taken on Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says all utensils may be taken except for a large saw and a kolta. All utensils may be taken either out of necessity or not out of necessity. Then the Chumya says they may not be taken except out of necessity.
Okay.
Can't imagine cutting cheese with a saw. I just doesn't seem to fit
I know
right.
it does seem a little odd.
Maestros, okay. Antols, which stayed a whole night near a pile which was liable, are liable since it is evident that they dragged away the whole night from produce whose work has been completed. Balbeke garlic, ripped or onions, Sicilian beans, and Egyptian lentils. Reb Meir says also kolakasa. Reb Yossi says also wild lentils are exempt from Maestros and may be bought from anyone in the seventh year. The highest seed pods of the arum, the seed of leeks, the seed of onions, seed of turnips, and radishes, and other seeds of garden produce which do not deserve as food are exempt from Maestros and may be bought from anyone in the seventh year, and though they were grown from Truma. Okay, and now we go to Meister Shani.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Hadron Alach Maseches Masros. Okay. Master Shane.
One Meister Shani. Aleph, and we have, I can find it, there you go. Meister Shani may not be sold or pledged or bartered, nor may it be used as a weight. And one should not say to this fellow in Yerushalayim, here is wine, give me oil. So also with any other produce, but they may give it to one another as a free gift. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, by the way, yesterday I couldn't remember what you told me. It was Meister Shani.
No worries.
couldn't remember. Out of memory. Okay. We have Gimel Aleph in Nida. If a woman expels a formless mass, if there is blood within it, she's tameh. But if not, she is tahor. Rabbi Yehuda says in either case, she is tameh. If a woman expels a red-colored object resembling a rind, a hair, a dirt, or midges, let her put it in water. If it dissolves, she is tameh. If not, she's tahor. If a woman awards something resembling fish, locusts, abominable creatures, or crawling creatures, if there is blood with them, and she is tameh. And if not, she is tahor. If a woman aborts something resembling a type of domesticated animal, wild animal, or fowl, whether it is non-kosher or kosher species, if it is a male, she observes the period of Tuma and Tara for a male. If she is, and as a female, she observes the period of Tuma and Tara for a female. And if the gender is not known, she observes the period of Tuma and Tara for a male and a female. And these are the words of Reb Meir. But the comments say anything that does not have something of a human form is not deemed a child. If a woman aborts an embryo full of water, full of blood, or full of multicolored matter, she does not need to be concerned that it is a child. But if the embryo is developed, she must observe the period of Tuma and Tahara of a male or a female.
Okay.
And Bechoros. Okay, Aleph Dalet. If a donkey which had previously given birth and one which had not given birth now bore two males, he must give one lamb to a Kohen. If they bore a male and a female, he must set aside one lamb for himself. As it states, the first one of a donkey you shall redeem with a saw. It may be of sheep or goats, or male or female, old or young, perfect or blemished. You may redeem it with many, many times. If it enters the pen to be tithed, it dies, and one may derive benefit from it. One may not redeem a firstborn donkey with a calf, an undomesticated beast, a slaughtered animal, a treifer, a hybrid, or a coy. But Eliezer permits redemption with a hybrid because it is a sod, but he prohibits redemption with a coy because it is doubtful. If he gave it to a Kohen, the Kohen might keep it until he sets aside a lamb or a kid in its stead. If one sets aside a lamb for redemption of a firstborn donkey and it dies, Rabbi Eliezer says one is responsible for it, as with the 5 Salem of the son. The comments say, however, one is not responsible for it, as with the redemption of Ma'aser Sheni. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Tzadok testify concerning the redemption of a firstborn donkey that died, and there is nothing here for a Kohen. If the firstborn donkey dies, Rabbi Eliezer says it must be buried, and benefit must be derived from the lamb. The Chachamim, however, say it need not be buried, and the lamb belongs to the Kohen. Okay.
Okay.
And we're on to Sota. Okay, hey Vav. And it shall be when the officers have finished addressing the people that they shall appoint captains of the host at the head of the people, and at the rear of the people. They station guards in front of them and others behind them with axes of iron in their hands. And if anyone tries to turn back, he has the authority to break his legs. The flight is the beginning of slaughter. As it is said, Israel has fled from before the Philistines, and there has also been a great slaughter among the people. And below it states, then Israel fled before the Philistines, and they fell slain. When is this the case? In a discretionary war, but in a war commanded by the Torah, all must go forth, even a groom from his chamber and a bride from her bridal chamber. But Yehuda said, when is this case? In a war commanded by the Torah, but in a war of duty, all go forth, even the groom from his chamber and the bride from her chamber. The passage regarding the decapitated calf must be recited in the Holy Tongue, as it is said, if a corpse should be found in the land, the elders and the judges shall go out. 3 members of the high court in Jerusalem would go out, and Rabbi Yehuda says 5. As it said, your elders 2 and your judges. Another 2, and since the court cannot be even, they add 1 more. This keeps saying about the brides going out of the bridal chamber. So it seems like the women were in the army then.
Well,